Welcome back to Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler. Here with my co-hosts, Ben Bateman and Michael Grothy.
What's up, team? What's up, Michael? Welcome back to the show. You were on hiatus for a week. I'm glad to see you're here again. I played Commander last night. It was without you. I was sad about it. I have so many questions. I have so many thoughts.
I was in the chat.
Yeah, I saw.
He was there supporting, making jokes.
About Mir Superion.
Yeah, there was not enough Superions in that game. People were disappointed.
No.
The people's Superion.
Look, if they had made Grand Architect legendary, we'd be seeing more Mir Superions.
If I could just build a Commander deck.
They did make him.
Oh, they did, yeah, Urza.
That's
not as fun as Grand Architect.
They literally did that. Maybe because Ben asked for it for years. So yeah,
Urza's like my favorite card. That also makes me so sad because it's literally just they added a blue mana symbol and made it 10 times as good as Grand Architect. Like it's not even like one mana better. It's offensively better. It's like such a good card. It makes Grand Architect look like it should be a freaking common. That's how good Urza is compared to Grand Architect.
Yeah, it takes the challenge out of it.
Lightning Bolt's a common.
You look at Grand Architect and you're like, how do I make this good? You look at Urza and you're like, oh, well, I guess.
Well,
it's done already.
I did it.
Pretty strong.
I would let you turn 0 and play with Mir Superion as a commander. Even I would even consider as a partner commander. Like you get one other legend plus Mir Superion.
Grand Architect.
Yeah, fine, easy. Just Grand Architect comes with Mir Superion for free. Is it better than Urza? I still think it's worse than Urza.
You cast Grand Architect and it makes a 5/6. It just makes a golem. That's what happens.
But you cast Urza and you get you do that happens, right? You cast Urza and you get a 0/0 that's equal to how many artifacts you have to play.
Doesn't cost you a card.
It doesn't. Well, when Mir Superion also, it would be in your command zone, so it also would not cost you a card.
Fair. Well, as much as I want to talk about Mir Superion tonight, that unfortunately is not what the show is about.
Tonight, so we as a podcast have existed in the world that COVID has as well, and as also, obviously I have expressed many times interest in formats like Commander, as has Michael, as has Marshall, and as had many a person, and we've all been, not all of us, but me and Ben have both been on game nights, and on the command zone a few times. So yes, we like Commander. And due to COVID and kind of the restrictions of it, it is one of the best ways to kind of play with friends in a safe way through digital means. And so we wanted to do kind of an episode on what is kind of doing what for a modern player, someone like Ben who classically dislikes Commander. I have tried getting him to play Commander for our entire friendship and have succeeded less than 20 times. I think we were talking that might be an overestimate, and it might be less than 10 times I've gotten him to play Commander in his life. And we want to kind of talk to for someone who wouldn't really like multiplayer and a avid modern player, what are some of the things that would make Commander more exciting? Is that something useful to him? How would you play then? How would you transfer kind of that skill set and that play style that you like there to a multiplayer format like Commander? And kind of the beginning of that. So this last Monday we did our first Commander live stream. We're going to try doing more Commander live streams moving forward on Monday evenings, or the next one will be Monday evening. So if you're listening to this, we released this episode Friday. On Monday, I don't have a calendar in front of me, so it's the 14th, 13th, 20th, Monday the 20th, hopefully. We will be doing another Commander stream at 8:30 p.m. PSD on the YouTube channel, and as well as my Twitch channel, Kess Wiley. And then Ben is also doing more streaming in general, but part of that is just getting Ben into formats like Commander and seeing what would make him enjoy it more than he has classically, and what are different issues he's had with the format. And on top of that, talk a little bit about COVID. Also, I do want to do a big shout out to the channel and celebration. This is the 2-year anniversary of our first video upload on YouTube, or yesterday was Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. So we are 2 years into being a YouTube channel, 2 years of knowing what we all look like instead of mysteriously being on the other side of an audio format podcast.
And it's funny, when we started the YouTube channel, the whole kind of idea was we've been a podcast already for over 4 years, or almost 4 years at that point, I think. So let's start a YouTube channel. Why not? Right? We had always thought about it. We hadn't done it. And we did, and it kind of grew slowly, and we're not that far from 10,000 subs, which is pretty fun and pretty cool to have grown from a just purely audio podcast. This was kind of an incidental launch, and now it feels like now feels like the show as a video show is just, that's what we do. I mean, I see the audio numbers, but I still feel like I get to interact with you guys. I see you when I talk to you here. I guess that was the same case when we were recording in person, but even so, it just, I don't know, this feels like the show to me now. For some reason. And so I'm really glad the channel has grown. And if you guys are watching and you have not already hit subscribe, let's get to 10,000. I know we can do it. I know we can do it in the next little while.
And I know for sure, like, we did a poll on the MMCast Twitter a week ago or earlier or over the weekend, and it was basically like, where do you listen the most, right? Where do you listen to the Masters of Modern podcast? And it was like 50% listen audio only, 30% watch the video on the YouTube channel, and then like 20% was like, we don't listen. But that means there's a ton of audio listeners that we love and would love if you can check out the YouTube channel, because there's going to be more content there, right? We already have the hot take videos that come out once a week. Sometimes that content isn't included in the audio feed, especially when it's the non sequitur content. We have the live stream Commander games that we're now going to be doing that will have kind of more of talk showy format. We'll get into some of the strengths of Commander in that way in a second. And also, I've done some direct camera videos. We were doing deck techs there. So it's definitely a really cool place if you love the audio, or even if you're just watching this in video all the time, make sure to like and subscribe, because that helps you get alerted when we come out with new content or we go live, which is always fun. And people seem to like it.
I'm really excited about tonight's episode to talk about this, because I think it's a conversation that we've had offline many times. Obviously the three of us in the office and hanging out, talking about Magic. This is a frequent topic of conversation. And I now feel that I've played enough games of Commander, like, that I have real questions to ask, not just like, it's not my favorite. So here's the reasons why, because they were kind of uneducated claims before. And I feel like I'm very excited to ask you guys these questions. So I want to remind everybody here, I already mentioned subscribe, leave a comment below. That's one of the main things we don't actually ask for that often. Honestly, YouTube videos, guys, for those of you that don't know, the algorithm favors comments over almost anything else. So when the video's over and you're watching, just leave a comment. Be like, yeah, this was a cool episode talking about this commander, or I want to see more of this. And actually, get a few hundred comments on a video, it just really goes like this.
Yeah, and on relevance, it'll be relevant to the episode. We'd love to hear what you think the best commander is for tempo play. So if you want to be a tempo player in Commander, what is the best commander? And if you have a deck list, that's even better. So please post in the comments.
Or if you have issues with Commander that you feel like we didn't adequately cover on the episode, or if you think, like, I don't like the Commander because X, and we don't really go over it, or you think we didn't do a good enough job going over it, let us know in the comments.
Yeah. So yeah, that hits both sides of the audience, people that play Commander and the people that don't. And we'd love to hear from both of you.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that we're talking about Commander a lot now is because in quarantine, we're all Paper Magic fans, and going to like F&M or going to a friend's house and like playing games, everybody's there. You can kind of huddle around one person's Modern game, and while you're like in between games or whatever, you can like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's like very social. But now, in the US, we can't do that. It's illegal. So, we're
and also very,
foolish
very
as well.
Yeah.
Foolish as well. And so in order to get that social interaction, like, it's not the same playing Magic Online. Even if I was playing with Magic Online against Alex on Discord, it's not the same as being at F&M, right? And we could do Paper Modern, where we like have webcams, but it's still just one-on-one. There's two of us in a channel. I guess we can get somebody else watching us play, but then that person doesn't get to play. So what's nice about Commander is that it really is like hanging out with a group of your friends while you're playing Magic together, in a way that like you can't really do otherwise very easily.
Yeah, and even like if you were doing 1v1 Commander, maybe you just have two decks, right? If like I only have one deck and Ben only has one deck, that's it. And eventually, like, there's a reason that Wizards and works towards, and we advocate as most Magic players advocate for the format of Modern to be diverse, right? Because if Modern was only one format or only one deck, it would be boring. So if me and you are playing and you have Tron and that is the only Modern deck you have, I eventually am going to stop playing with you because I don't want to play against Tron 600 times in a row over the last 6 months. And so when you're able to play in groups, you can either play against different people or even switch decks out, borrow your friend's deck to get better at it. None of that's really available as part of a social experience, where Commander lets you play against more people at once in a more varied environment, and does have a lot of potential with that. And it is one of the versions of Paper Magic that seems to be a growing community. And so, that's, yeah.
So a big shout out to our Nobles of House Modern. Before we get into the main topic of the episode, we've got Cam Albergini, Andrew Kelso, and Brandon S. Russell. Big time drink up with the pinky. There you
Pinkies
pinky
up
out.
to the houses.
Pinkies up.
Nobles of House Modern.
Thank you guys. That's the Nobles of House Modern we hang out with for about 15 minutes in a private Discord chat before we tape the show every week. So if you guys are interested in becoming a part of that, join the Storm tier. I believe actually go look at the tiers, patreon.com/theMMcast. You can see all the cool stuff on there. But so Alex, I kind of want to start with a topic here, you know, as far as the Commander versus Modern conversation. I want to start with the topic of if you are somebody who classically does not like to play with more than one person, like if you just don't like that experience, how can Commander be fun for you?
Well, if you like absolutely hate it, if you don't want to play with more than one person at a time, I don't know how. If that's like, if you get like allergies from being around more than two people at once, I don't know how to fix that problem. I do think that my question is why, right? Like that I think is more an answer is because there's generally a reason you don't want that. Is it because if you know, obviously there's the extremely introverted and don't want to talk to people. I can't solve that. That's a thing. But if it's more like gameplay reasons or play style that you think is not available, what are those reasons? So my question to you, Ben, would be as a follow-up, why would you not want to play with more than 1v1?
Well, okay, so I'm a social person. I mean, somewhat, but I like being around people. I enjoy. Alex laughs when I say that. An extroverted introvert. I like being around groups of people. I certainly, and this is the background, just for everybody who knows this as far as Commander goes. I mean, I played my first games of Commander when I was in high school, like back when it was Elder Dragon Highlander. There was no Commander product. It was I played with like Una. I like had an Una deck, and it was really sweet. I had like a lot of fun playing with all my friends. We'd go to a Denny's and we'd stay up super late, and it was great. It was a great time. And it was before I ever sort of had adopted competitive Magic. I hadn't really started to crack that code of like competitive deck building. And so I think the further I got into that sort of controllable, I want to control all of these resources to be able to accomplish my goal and have total control over it. That's when I think the multiplayer aspect started to lose me, because it's very hard to contend with politics if you're trying to control the game state by just managing your resources. That's, I think, where the separation happens. And so that for me is, I think, the biggest detractor is I have a hard time. My brain like melts when the politics come into play because I have a hard time with it. Right.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess your issue is kind of like, because you're playing against three other people, they can decide to gang up or they can decide to do something that doesn't make sense that maybe you were counting on. So someone might not make just the correct decision every turn, and that's the only thing you can expect to happen. And therefore that can mess up your game plan. Would that be a correct way in kind of saying your issue?
I think that's a good statement to make, right? And I think what I've learned from watching other Commander players is this. I'm not the only player who likes to play 1v1 Magic. I'm not the only tempo player. I'm not the only player who likes to go 1-for-1 with counterspells. Mm-hmm. There are millions of us, and lots of those players play Commander. They have just figured out a way to take advantage of like the rules within Commander in a way that I haven't figured out yet. So I can tell you the deck that I played last night was a Cedh River Cutthroat deck. That's the deck that I recently kind of built. It wasn't like a year ago I built it, but you know, and Cedh River Cutthroat, for those guys that are listening that don't know, it's a Shadowmoor card. It's a 2-drop, 1/3. The end of each player's turn, if any opponent of yours has lost 3 life, you draw an extra card. So the idea with the card when I built it was like, I'll play this on turn 2, then I'll just have counter spells and lots of like incremental damage. If one opponent attacks another opponent, I can still draw off of it. Like, this will be a great way to on turn start incrementally drawing cards. So my deck is full of ponders and, you know, cheap counter spells and all kinds of interaction. And what I have found playing the deck is it just feels like drawing an extra card, even an extra couple cards a turn, kind of underpowered. But I don't want to play things that cost 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 because that's not the type of Magic that I like to play. So I don't understand how to bridge those two styles. That's kind of where I leave it off.
And I think my answer to that would be, and we asked Twitter, like, because basically the thesis is you want to play tempo in Commander, right? Like that's kind of where you're at. You don't really want to play control, I think. Would that be correct? Like, because there are ways to play control in Commander, but they're much stacksier. They're kind of what I did, right? Where like I was able to put together a combo that involved not land tax. What's the land I had in play?
Glacial Chasm, not chasm, chasm. And different ways to recur it from my graveyard to make it so that I couldn't take damage, right? So I was able to put a pretty hard control onto the format. You can also be control with a lot of like board wipes and, destroy all, like Akroma's Vengeance and Merciless Eviction type stuff, since there's like typically more than creatures you have to deal with, but you can do like a lot of board wipes, a little bit of 1-for-1 removal, maybe some counter spells. But in general, like if like Alex plays a threat and you counter it with counterspell, now you are down a card, Alex is down a card. In 1v1, it's fine, right? You just 1-for-1. But in multiplayer, there's 2 other players, or in, assuming a 4-player commander game, there's 2 other players who are not down a card. So you can't play the whole game like that. You need to be playing Wrath of God and getting like 9 of your collective opponent's cards for your 1. And that's kind of how you make up the difference.
And what I would say one of the issues
in a control deck.
Right. And one of the issues I've had as a commander player is I also classically like to lend myself to control, right? Even in modern, blue-white control and Jund, who I'd argue is mid-range, but I definitely am leading builds towards controller shells. In modern, I play the same way, right? Malfagor is a Staxy. I'm wiping the board a bunch of times and building up an engine of value. In Geist, I have a bunch of board. I have at one point I had 8 board wipes. I've cut that down because that was too many because they all don't do anything after the first one. But and all of the Kess decks I have are different versions of control. And there are ways to kind of mitigate that, right? Like as Michael said, you benefit with that. You play stuff like Cryptic Command, right? Or counter spells that do gain you an advantage. You can also just make sure you have card draw engines that build up, right? Like there's stuff that like Rhystic Study is a great example, is a card that draws you a lot of cards accidentally because people don't want to pay the 1.
Want to pay for it, right? I mean, when you played the Rhystic Study, I thought it was amazing because, and I've seen it played in Commander a million times, but you played Rhystic Study, and I found myself looking at it and thinking, you're going to draw so many more cards off this Rhystic Study than I have drawn off of my Commander, because I don't care if you draw cards because it's Commander. And then I was like, this is a stupid Commander. Why did I do this? No one should care if I draw cards.
That's the thing about Rhystic Study, and it's the thing about a lot of it that I feel like Ben is maybe getting at, which is when you have that many opponents, like you just can't play around everything, right? Like when you're playing 1v1, you kind of, maybe you know the matchup, maybe you don't, but you can see what mana your opponent has open. You can kind of think like, well, this is what they might do, so I'd better hold up a counter spell, or like I'd better remove their creature because I know they're going to play, a Sword of Feast and Famine or something. And like in Modern, for example, like you're always making sure that your answers are lining up with their threats or vice versa, and you want to like try and predict what they're going to do. But in Commander, you have 3 opponents. You can't predict what all of them are going to do. You can be like, well, that person has enough mana to play their commander, so maybe I should hold up a counterspell. But beyond that, there's just too much going on. There's so much variance in everybody's decks. There's tons of, like, everything's a one of. You have tons of opponents. You like can't pay attention to everything that's going on. Playing commander optimally is like extremely difficult to impossible. So you kind of just have to do your best. And I think that's hard for a lot of like either competitive players or typically 1v1 players, because you're like not used to just kind of like giving up some of the control of the game because it's too much, right?
And Alex, I'd love to know what you think about this. But so we just touched on something, which is like when you come over from 1v1 Magic, you have certain understandings about if you do X, Y, or Z, you'll probably win the game. One of those classic ones is card advantage. If I outdraw you 2-1 in a 1v1 game, there's a very high likelihood I'll win the game. If one of your opponents in Commander outdraws you 2-1, it's not that likely they're going to win the game, because there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of other variables than just drawing cards. There are very swingy, very powerful things going on. So I'd love to know, you guys, what are some of the sort of 1v1 truisms in Magic that don't really apply to Commander?
Well, I guess a couple of things what you said. One, I actually think modern Magic, not necessarily modern the format, but Magic in general, has moved a little bit away from just card advantage guarantees win, right? Like there's an argument that modern has become more about, whoever can win their way with haymakers eventually is going to be the person that's more successful. And no matter how many, like, there's a reason Delver of Secrets hasn't been good in modern forever. And part of that is that Ponder aren't available. And Death Shadow is the version of that has been playable. But like, also just tempo is harder in that format because I'm trying to get in a 4/5 for one, and you're playing Primeval Titan and winning on turn 4. So there are challenges there, right? And I think that does carry over the Commander, and some of that might be Commander influencing modern or other formats. I do think that card advantage is valuable in Commander, right? Like I disagree with the statement that if I draw 5 cards and my opponents don't, I'm ahead. Now it depends what those cards are, right? Like I think one of the mistakes I noticed with the Cedh deck you were playing is you were playing like cantrips can be good in Commander. You have to eke more out of them. So for instance, Kess, of the 2 Kess decks I have, the first one I have is playing like 8 cantrips, one mana cantrips, like right up your alley. But because Kess can buy them back, because a lot of cards care about how many instants and sorceries are in your grave, because it's like an instants and sorceries themed deck, me casting those isn't just draw a card, 1 mana, get a better card, right? It's draw a card, get a better card, then trigger 3 things, plus I can rebuy it with Kess once it's in the graveyard and fuel all these other spells. So if you're going to play with effects like that are very fun, you just want to be eking out of them a little bit more than you would in a modern tempo game where you're just using them for card filtering.
And I had put some of that in there, right? So like, for instance, the deck is playing Talrand. It's, the deck is playing like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. It's trying to take.
I saw a Runechanter's Pike in there.
Yeah, Pike. I mean, Pike, honestly, I was like 1 play sequence away from killing Alex with the Pike. I mean, that's the whole idea, is you have Inkmoth Nexus and Pike. And so you can, like I believe I killed Carson with the Pike on Flyer. And I think the whole idea was that like Inkmoth Nexus with Pike and a bunch of tutors, I should be able to one-shot certain players at certain times. When I think of Commander, by the way, just sort of, and this is maybe my magical Christmas land of like the way I think about it. Like when I built Cedh, it was like, okay, there's going to be 3 people and I'm going to have, I'm going to hit my land drops. I'm going to draw cards. I'm going to sculpt my perfect hand and I'm going to wait for my opening. And then I'm going to like 1-2 punch this person. And then the next turn, this person won't see this thing coming. And then I'll be 1v1 with this other person and I'm a better player. So I'll win. That's never going to work. But that's the way my brain is like, I'll take them out. Like I'll see the opening. Like with you, Alex, you had Maze of Ith and Glacial Chasm. At one point I like demonic tutored for my stuff of the past so that, or vamp tutored for it, so that I figured you were going to let the Glacial Chasm die. I would instant speed remove your graveyard in response to some trigger to get rid of your land thing. You were going to have, and then I was going to Pike you with the Inkmoth Nexus, holding open Mana Drain for Progenitus to have a huge turn. Like, I was like, okay, I'm going to do all these things, but it just doesn't go the way you imagine it. And then you're left with like 1 bad sequence and you can't quite get there.
Well, so 2 things. One, that happens in modern, like you could, for all intents and purposes, I was the Lantern player, right? Like I literally had what Lantern Lock does going on with a 4-player game, but I basically was put in a position where I was manipulating the top of my graveyard, making it so like I could ignore most of what you guys were doing, and just counter the things that stopped me from winning the game, right? And that's like kind of what Lantern does, right? It just is like, oh, I don't care if you draw 5 4s, I have Bridge in play, and you're never going to be able to attack me. I didn't say Bridge from Below, I dodged that one. There's only one Bridge in Modern now,
Crushed
so
it.
it's
Crushed
easy.
it.
People keep wanting to unban Bridge from Below, and that's nonsense, because then I might have to say it
Crashing
again.
Drawbridge? Are you going to start calling it Crashing Drawbridge now from Eldraine?
I have no fear. If that card starts seeing play, though, I'm wrecked. I just have no chance.
Battle of the Bridge.
I'm trying to think of other bridges. Ooh, yes, Battle of the Bridge.
Yeah. I do want to before we move on a little bit, do want to do a big shout out. Runechanter's Pike is the business, and all Commander players who have spell decks, you should be playing it. I've killed more people out of Kess, a deck that has like very strong control and like combo finishes available. I've killed more people with Runechanter's Pike than any other card. It's like I
love that card. It was
insane.
if you guys don't remember, back in standard when it was in standard and Delver decks, that card was like the game winner. You'd attack for like 13. It's like that card's really sweet. And like, especially if you're in Commander where you're like, I'll just set up this Inkmoth Nexus that no one really sees coming in my spell deck, and then I'll just like suit this up and attack you for 14 poison, and like you're just dead.
Right.
It's like pretty innocuous, but it also has first strike, which makes blocking a lot of the gigantic threats in Commander actually pretty solid. Like,
well, and every commander in Commander has a version of Infect, right? Like, because Commander damage exists, if you strap that onto Cedh and you hit someone twice with it, they're dead, because you just need to do 21 Commander damage. So like Runechanter's Pike does a lot of work.
Yeah, the whole theory behind the Pike was lots of spells, and if I put this on Cedh relatively early and attack, there will almost always be someone at the table that I can like dome for 4 with first strike that won't be able to block effectively, and I'll draw my card. Mm-hmm. And like if you kill Cedh, he's cheap enough that I'll just replay him. Like that was sort of where the theory, that and Inkmoth Nexus. But
so Ben, for what it's worth, I actually really like playing like 3 mana or less commanders for that reason. Is I see people playing like 6 mana commander, some big dragon or whatever, and they play it one time and it dies, and then it costs 8, and they're like, oh god, this is going to be my whole turn for the rest of the game. Like it doesn't matter how many lands I have out, 8 mana is going to be almost like, more than half of it for the rest of the game, right? So people are typically casting those commanders like once or twice, maybe. But a 3-mana commander, you're just like, oh, I'll just play this 3 times. Who cares? Whatever.
And me and Mike were even talking about before, and I think maybe you were there. I forget. Before we started recording and talking about like different tempo decks, and I realized recently that Geist, which is the deck that I've had forever, it's all foil. It's very shiny. Is basically a tempo deck in the sense that like what it does is you get Geist in. Geist is impossible to get rid of, right? It's a 3-mana hexproof creature, and even if they get rid of it, it's 5 mana to play it the next time. So like, fine. And then it does just low enough damage that people stop really paying attention to it, right? He's attacking for 2 commander damage and 4 angel damage that you can split between 2 different players, or use the angels to kill planeswalkers or whatever you need to. And so you like slowly just chip away at people, and they don't really pay it. And they like, because you're attacking multiple people at once, they kind of are able to kind of not get as mad. I've noticed like that, like they don't, because like classically, and Michael brought this example, is that if I attack someone with a 2/2 randomly, they'll just because in Commander there's decision fatigue, right? You don't want to attack anyone in the way that like in regular Magic, when new players are playing, they don't like attacking, right? You just feel bad, or you don't know who to choose and who should be the person you start attacking. And so as soon as you like give someone an excuse, they now have an excuse, right? Oh, you attacked me with a 2/2. Now I know I can attack you. I'm going to waste my resources to go after you. Geist benefits from that in 2 ways. One, it avoids it by kind of spreading the hate. And then 2, it's a commander like other commanders can be that, you know, in a tempo fight, you sometimes maybe want to pick a fight with someone, right? Where you're putting yourself in a position where now you're going after each other and the other 2 players will ignore you too because they want you to waste your resources on each other. And if you can build a deck that can do that, while building resources during that fight. That's why Edric, I think, is a really good example of someone that does this, where you're drawing cards due to this fight, so you can get an advantage from being in combat 1v1 that then lets you not die after that battle, and you've expended some resources to kill someone. And I think there's different ways to kind of accomplish that.
On that note, I'll ask you guys both, because I'm actually curious about this. So when I think tempo, like traditional 1v1 tempo, I tend to think like you're trying to eke out a small enough advantage turn after turn that you will win the game just before your opponent stabilizes and comes back. That's like you'll probably get there by keeping them slightly off balance, getting in for that extra point per turn, or keeping them 1 land off, or whatever it is, enough turns in a row that you'll just quite get there. And they'll look at what happened and they'll be like, none of the things that happened to me seem powerful enough, but you strung them together just right and you got me, right? So when I think about doing that in Commander, it's kind of what I talked about a second ago. But here's the problem. The effects and those advantages we're talking about of, let's say, gaining a half a card, or let's say it's getting in 1 extra point of damage against 3 people at once, they don't really work using the traditional tempo cards that were created for 1v1 Magic. I mean, I think the Commander sets have been such a boon for Commander players for exactly that reason. They're literally created to empower you to be able to sort of fight that fight against a bigger table. And so if you're scaling up the effect, let's just pretend of like, I don't know what like a good example is, like
Cyclonic Rift.
a single wasteland. Like, okay, Cyclonic Rift is amazing, but like everybody knows that. But like in 1v1, if I wasteland your important land to keep you off a color, if I do the same thing in a game of Commander and I wasteland you, Alex, and a table of 4 to keep you off an important color, A, you have way more time to recover, so who cares? But B, I've just 1-for-1 your land. Like, who cares? That effect doesn't matter really very much in a longer game with multiple opponents. So you need something that's like all players sacrifice a land, or all players pay an extra 1 for all lands they control, or they sacrifice them. Something else like that is what you really need, right?
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, yes, there's some disadvantage, but you want to do it in a strategic way. It's almost more like finding pressure points when you're fighting someone versus trying to like outmaneuver them, I guess, where in the sense that like most of the time, you're right, just like in a classic Delver of Secrets Legacy Wasteland matchup, the classic I play Delver on turn 1 and then I just Wasteland you out of the game doesn't work in Commander, right? But the like way Ghost Quarter is used in Modern, or Field of Ruin is used in Modern even better, which is more like I just killed that land that you will need to win, or like I'm stopping you from playing this card that will win you the game in the long run or immediately, and therefore I've used this resource A to the benefit of the group, and maybe there's some benefit in that way, or B, just am able to like stop like losing. Like if your opponent was going to win it doesn't matter if you're down a card because you're no longer losing, right? Like so there's
Quite literally the example of last night, that if I had drawn Wasteland at any point in time, combined with the other effects that I had, and I had just like Wastelanded your Glacial Chasm and then recoiled your Maze of Ith and then attacked you with my piked up Inkmoth Nexus, I probably would have just won the game.
Right.
Like I just like
So-
basically needed Wasteland.
I guess I have two things. One is that, yeah, you have to ignore a lot of what your opponents are doing in Commander if you're playing any control element. Even if you're not playing control, even if you're playing a deck that you would characterize as tempo, if you have reactive cards, you really have to pick your spots, because you have one Swords of Plowshares or one Counterspell or one, Ghastly Demise if you're feeling spicy or something, and you have... I've definitely played that in Commander. I love it. I love one mana removal in Commander. That's why Ghastly Demise came to mind. And one Scred. That's another favorite of mine in Commander. You have so many opponents doing so much stuff that like you have to make sure you get the most out of that card, right? Like, in 1v1 you can kind of like fire it off and like draw a couple cards and you'll get another one and that'll be enough. But like in Commander 2 might not be enough. Like you have to really pick your spots to use your interaction on stuff that's going to win the game or stuff that's going to lose the game or stuff that's going to like put somebody so far ahead. And kind of that takes knowing Commander a little bit, right? Like in Modern, it's the same thing. Is if you're playing blue-white control and your opponent, plays something and you have a counterspell in hand, but it's your only counterspell, you're like, well, I have to evaluate, like, is this Ren and 6 really going to kill me? Do I need to Logic Knot it right now? Or should I save this Logic Knot for the Liliana that's coming down next turn? Or like, you can kind of play around it a little bit based on your knowledge of your opponent's deck and of the format.
Because all the cards are so good, sort of? Is that like, because I had that moment last night, right? Where like there's lots of things going on. Like, do I mana drain this Progenitus or do I? And then like once Alex finally got to that final turn where he was like, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. My one thought was like, I don't care if he Genesis waves here because I'm trying to just win and kill him. And like
Right.
he can cast all the things he wants, but if I like, he can have 13 permanents in play, but if one of them doesn't stop me from doing my 1-2 punch of killing with Inkbound Texas, why do I care?
Right.
Like,
so I think that's it. You have to play to your outs in Commander, same as any format. But the tricky part is that like it plays out differently in Commander. I would also say that like the whole tempo, like gaining half a card, just spending your mana more efficiently than your opponent in order to like get a leg up on them and then barely beat them, grab victory from the jaws of defeat. Alex was kind of touching on this earlier, and this is something that like a lot of old school Magic players, like from the 90s, who are like competitive in the 90s, now complain about, is that Magic nowadays in every format, Modern, Standard, not quite Legacy, but it's starting to be like that a little bit more, and Commander is all about haymakers, right? You got to play your Uro or your like big cool Planeswalker, your Teferi Hero of Dominaria or something. You got to do something big and splashy that just makes whatever your opponent doing not matter, to an extent. A lot of the time, like it's hard to just kind of get by on small advantages when your opponent is just like, oh, I just top decked my Uro, I'll like get back in the game, gain 3, get a land, get it back from the graveyard, do it again. Now you have to answer this. Oh, I'll just escape it. Like, there's just such big effects being printed now that kind of take over the game themselves that they can kind of invalidate a lot of those small edges. And I think if you want to be good at Magic in any format, you kind of have to adjust to that a little bit nowadays, I think. You either have to like make sure you have answers for that stuff, but even then, like if your opponent plays Uro and you immediately cling to dust it out of their graveyard, they're still up a card and they're up 3 life. And you're up some mana, I guess, but
and so like it's more about trying to figure out, to me, why do you like that tempo gameplay, right? Where to me it feels like you enjoy that playstyle more because you feel like you're outmaneuvering your opponent in ways that they don't have a way to kind of, that lets you use your intelligence to be able to kind of beat the game in a way that makes it feel like there was a lot of interaction and back and forth, but you were able to eke out enough of an advantage and win, right? So one of the like top answers for the question, like how do you play tempo in Commander, was threat and effects, right? Or effects like Yasova was a great example. I know Michael has had Yasova built a few different times.
I do have a Yasova Dragonclaw deck, yep.
And then I recently built the second Kess deck I have, which is Kess Does Crimes, purely because I got sick of Kess. People really want to play against Kess, me playing it because it's my name and whatever, and we've previewed it now twice. And so I wanted to play something a little bit more casual, and I've had a Silumgar, like clones and mind control, and like every card I'm playing is a really taking opponents' threats and making it my own deck. And it's really good against anyone, right? Because it's always going to be as powerful as the person I'm playing against, and it's never my fault. So I thought maybe I can apply that to cast, and also wanted to take advantage of adventure cards and a few other things. And so it ends up being this cool aristocrat-y threaten effects, blink effects, the like blink things that I've threatened to get to keep them. And it has the most tempo-y feel to maybe Magic I've played in Commander in a long time, because it's a lot of like, I'm playing incremental advantage effects that are comboing with my other incremental advantage effects to take your stuff, and now I'm taking your resources to make resources for myself, which then kind of negates the fact that I'm playing against 3 people, and there's like building off of that. And I think Yusova plays in a similar way, or when I played against Yusova back in the day, it felt like you were taking what I was doing and taking advantage of it in a way that felt very back and forth.
And it's a way to like spend your mana more efficiently, clones and threatens and mind controls and stuff like that, because like if you spend 6 mana on Grave Titan and I play Phantasmal Image to copy your Grave Titan, I'm like way ahead on mana, and I'm way ahead of every player because I just got a massive effect from my 2 mana. It does, like, relying on your opponents can be a little bit scary, but I do think that's like kind of a way to get an advantage that really does affect all your opponents. Like, you're just getting so much for your mana that there's no way that like all the mana generated by your opponents is even like, so now I play this Phantasmal Image and copy your Grave Titan, and then I also play, you know, something else, or I hold up a counter spell or whatever, and now I'm like spending my mana so efficiently, I'm like kind of getting that tempo advantage that you get in other formats by like removing your opponent's 3 mana threat with a 1 mana spell or whatever.
I was just gonna say, but like you mentioned, like a Phantasmal Image, like cloning a Grave Titan, like that's great, you get the same effect. But I would imagine paying 2 more mana to take their Grave Titan is even better, right? Like, because like that now you're affecting their board, but you're also getting a huge threat on your board. It's like that effect in a multiplayer game is like even that much better, because like now you've made someone like vulnerable to someone else on their next turn, right?
It depends too, right? Like there's ways to mitigate in multiplayer having counter magic in a way that's different than 1v1, where it's almost the threat of having it is worth something that normally it wouldn't be, where it's like, don't do that thing to me, do it to someone else because I have a counterspell. And you don't know I have a counterspell, but I have 2 blue up and I've held it open for 4 turns and been talking about it.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of bargaining where like you can say, you know, oh, don't attack me or I'll do this. I feel like some people get pretty annoyed with that, and sometimes they'll like that can backfire on you, but they're, you know, it is a way to spend your resources efficiently. If you can be like, I have this thing, so don't hurt me or whatever, you can like get by with never casting the card and not spending any mana, not spending any cards, and kind of avoiding bad things happening to you.
And my point more there was that mana efficiency is important. I mean, Vincent from Pleasant Kenobi just did a whole video on how people should stop playing with any lands that enter the battlefield tapped in their commander deck, because just losing the tempo on turn 5 of playing your 5-drop because you had to play a Guild Gate or something, or even something that's a little bit more powerful that comes into play, like a Temple, puts you that much farther back, right? Like on one hand, you can say if people are playing so large things, your 2 mana thing versus 4 mana thing doesn't matter. But on the other hand, you being able to like outplay cards from your opponent does matter, right? The tempo of that is valuable in Commander. If I get to play 3 spells a turn to my opponent's 1 spell a turn, and the power level of the cards we're talking about are high enough that like my 2-drop is probably as powerful as their 5-drop in a lot of the time, or it's not hard to make that happen. Phantasmal Image is a great example of that. That like you can take advantage of that. Like there is benefits to tempoing out and getting to draw a bunch of cards and get to play 3 of them a turn versus your opponent who's playing 1 card a turn.
Well, I think also to add to that, Alex, like, you know, that's a conversation that in Highlander Gauntlet you and I were having more recently, was like the sort of mana base in a 100-card format where you have to stretch all your lands across. Anybody who's watching who doesn't know, it's like you build 600-card decks. There's no repetitions between the 6 decks. The reserve list is the ban list. And you have to stretch all of your good lands over 6 decks. And so like in that format, the conversation we all were having for a while was like, well, you know, you have to be able to fix your mana. So these temples and these tapped lands, they seem, you know, tri-lands, they seem fair enough to play. But like, I would always look at my deck and be like, no, I'll play a terrible untapped land that gets me more than one color, because like I want to maximize my mana every single turn. This is a 1v1 format. And like I think that Commander players maybe sometimes look at their decks and be like, well, I'll have time, because if I'm like not doing anything and I'm a little slower and my land is tapped, I like won't get killed right away. So I can kind of recover and like play these like less effective lands. But what you really want to do is play an untapped land and do nothing, and then kind of catch up and then kill everyone. Like like playing like tap things where you're like, I can get away with being slower and playing these kind of slow bad cards. Like that's just not as good. Like your deck is not as good if you're doing that. Like play the politics correctly and play better cards, and you'll probably win more.
I mean, I guess, like, you know, this doesn't necessarily have to do with lands, because lands are purely utility. But I do think that, like, Commander is not always about playing the best thing. And that's where the difference between, like, CEDH or competitive EDH versus regular Commander comes in, where it's like, if everybody was playing, like, an optimal deck, we would all be, like, you know, demonic consultationing into Thassa's Oracle, or we would all be playing a bunch of stacks pieces, or, you know, mana vaults and crypts, and, you know, playing Timna and Thrasios or whatever. Like, you know, there are people have gotten the format to a point where there is an optimal metagame like you would see in Modern or Standard or another competitive format. But that's not the way that most people play. Most people play with like a lot more self-expression, and they play a lot more like kind of loosey-goosey. And the reason for that is that playing, like I said earlier, playing optimally is so hard because there's so many variables with so many opponents, that I think like it's more fun personally to just play a little more loose and just play cards that I like to play with. And, you know, maybe Cedh River Cutthroat is not the best blue-black commander for the strategy that you're going for, but if you think Cedh River Cutthroat is a cool card, then you want to try and make it work. I think that's what Commander is about for me.
Alex and Michael, before you respond to that, because I'm curious to know, just based on what you just said, Michael, I think this is an important thing to ask. Is Commander about winning? Or, I mean, is it more about winning than anything else? Or is winning secondary, do you think, to most players' experiences when they're playing?
I think that varies from player to player. For me, I think that a game is less fun if everybody is not trying to win. I think that's where, like, kind of the battle of wits aspect of any game of any kind, video game, board game, card game, tag, sport, whatever, I think that, like, if everybody is trying to win, it, like, truly becomes a contest that is, like, more interesting and fun to me. But that said, like, I think when I'm building my deck, I think making something that I think is cool, try to work, is different. But once I'm sitting down, I'm going to, like, use my resources as best I can and try and win in general. But I also think that Commander is a lot about social interaction, and that's why I play that versus a 1v1 format, and that's the reason that I try and... like, it's a big strength of the format, and I think you would be missing out if you didn't kind of, like, have the kind of Timmy social interaction aspect of it
so
in the forefront.
So this is kind of a question that, like, the ranking scale, I don't know if you've seen any of this drama on the internet's been, but basically, like, at Magic Fest or in the command zones at GPs, they had kind of these ranking systems where you would rank your deck 1 to 10, right? And 10 was meant to be kind of CDH, and 1 was all the way down to, like, super casual, or, like, I just bought a precon, right? And then everything in between.
I think precons were like 3s or 4s. 1 was like, this is my chair tribal deck. The art of every card has a chair in it, or whatever.
And,
right? Like,
and
I'm playing this random Legends card that's a vanilla 7/6 as my commander because I think it's funny, or like.
And a lot of people think ranking decks is like, there are people that, like, were very against ranking your deck because that never works and it's always subjective. And I think part of the issue for me personally is that it's too subjective, right? Or it's too granular, right? 1 through 10 is so many different numbers, and I think there's, like, really 4 different. I like using the Halo difficulty ranking, which is normal, heroic, easy, and legendary, or whatever. And it's like, I think that normally, like, and CDH, I think you actually would really like CDH. I think there is something. It is something that you would enjoy about that version of the format, and it would actually be really interesting to get, like, some of the CDH people that I'm friends with to do one of our streams, and then just, like, provide lists to us that, like, we get to, like, we'll like proxy out. We go to the office and print it out and try them out, because I think you would enjoy the, like, extreme version of Commander that is about winning and is, like, much more about playing, like, let me like very much like Legacy and Vintage and plays even, like, 1v1 Magic more than regular Commander does. To answer your original question, I'm playing Commander to win. I mean, I don't want to play Commander to win in a, like, DBZ, like Vegeta versus like a town of humans kind of way, where it's like my deck is so much more powerful that it's not fun for anyone. I want the game to be good, but I'm playing the game. I'm trying to aim for the same power level that I am at and then beat my opponents on purpose. Like, I'm never like trying to just have a good time.
Right, it's like when you show up to a Modern tournament and you play against somebody playing a standard deck because they like don't know what Modern is, and they just like showed up to the shop and they're like, "Can I play?" And the shopkeep's like, "Yeah, this is legal," and you just like totally crush them because they're playing like, you know, it just happened to me, and it feels really bad. Like I didn't enjoy that match.
Right, like I've like the reason I built Kess Crimes versus Kess Volume 1 is because I would play against people that like had precons and were excited to play against one of us and play against the Kess deck because it's the one that I've made, and then it's like, oh, I just storm off with 1,000-Year Storm and like a bunch of dark rituals I've copied, and I'm like, this feels
right. It's less like cool. It's more just like really oppressively good.
Right, and so like I built Kess Crimes because it's like, oh, I'm stealing your creature, so whatever precon you bought, I get your whatever card, and it's never going to be better than what you're doing, but like I'm doing silly things and it's fun. So it does. Well, so, my intent is to win, but my intent is to win at the power level my opponents are at.
Yeah, so I think when you bring up CEDH, I think the question that brings to mind for me, because I would agree, honestly, like based on my experience having played Highlander, I think that makes sense, right? Like you're adding one variable to 1v1 Magic. I love Singleton. I mean, I'm gonna literally tonight when we're done with the show, I'm gonna go on Twitch and I'm gonna go stream maybe some of that Gladiator Magic nonsense you guys were telling me about. I like kind of want to do that.
Field of the Dead was banned today, so do not build a deck around Field of the Dead. So Field of the Dead and Oko are now the two.
The card is very not fun anyway, so you're not missing out on much.
Yeah, you missed that in the ban conversation, Michael. But I brought up your point that Field of the Dead sucks.
It sucks.
But like,
I hate it.
I'm like a big fan of 1v1. I think Singleton 1v1 is awesome. It's like so much fun. And so when you mention CEDH, what comes to mind for me is that like I believe you're correct. However, if I was to build a good CEDH deck and enjoy it, and then come on here and be like, it was so much fun to play EDH 1v1 competitively.
Oh no, sorry.
CEDH really
CEDH is 4-player.
Oh.
CEDH is a like taking Commander to its natural conclusion of trying to do the most power. Everyone is trying to do the most powerful thing, period, at all times. 4 players still.
Oh, I thought it was I thought it was competitive EDH. I thought it was the 1v1 version.
No, that's
French. That's French Commander. And CEDH has basically overshadowed it because there's a lot of really popular CEDH creators, and there are not a lot of popular French Commander creators, or if there are, they're not US based. So
okay, so when I was hanging out with like Josh and Jimmy and Kyle and those guys kind of recently, and I was out at the Command Zone house and we were playing Commander, they all were like, we have our like tier 1 or whatever, like our like play to win decks. Should we play a game of that? And it was like somebody brought out like what the hell is the name of the Jeskai Commander? There's also a blue-white Planeswalker of Narset, yeah, Narset. Somebody, it was like, okay, these are like the things where I try to like win on turn 2, turn 3 types of decks, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's like a little aggressive, but like it's gonna be over fast.
so it's closer to vintage, like right, like that's I guess where I would compare it, where it's like the game ends by turn 5, but what happens between turn 1 and 5 is way more intense than a normal game of Magic. I would also say that my experience with Jimmy and Josh, unless this has gotten different, which they might have because they've had more exposure, their most competitive decks are probably within the heroic level.
They're like their most competitive decks are like 8s or 9s, whereas like there are 10s.
yeah, 10s exist.
What are like the
up until like 3 weeks, like Flash Hulk. So like a lot of the times they're playing partner commanders, right? Where it's like, I did play against a Hopa Garriper CDH deck during the Command Fest, where it was like all colorless cards, but it was like it was an artifact base, and they were using Hopa Garriper to make it so their opponents didn't kill them. It was much more stacksy, but that was basically playing what's the guy who reveals a bunch of artifacts and taps for mana in Legacy?
He's colorless, or
Legacy, you reveal cards from your hand. If they're Metalworker. It was like basically Legacy Metalworker. It was like literally playing that deck.
Yeah, and you're like Tangle Wiring or Winter Orbing and playing a bunch of mana rocks so you get around the downside, and then you just like Sundering Titan or something.
Sundering Titan's banned, but yes, basically.
Oh man. It used to be unbanned. I can't keep track. Like I play in games where people wouldn't play Sundering Titan, right? Like that's the Commander community I've cultivated. So I don't even know.
And so there's like and the metagame is a little bit in flux, right? Because Flash Hulk was a very, very large player until very recently. They had to ban Flash, but like basically, like the Flash Hulk combo.
Yep.
Yeah, and like Thassa's Oracle is a big feature in this format, and
Demonic Consultation is legal for some reason.
And so like there's like cards you love see a lot of play, and people play with a lot of like the cantrips that you love see a lot of play in this type of format, right? Because it's much more about finding early the cards you need to make sure you can win.
But like,
or that you cannot lose in the case of a control deck. Like everything happens very quickly, like in Legacy or Vintage, where like it's turn, it's my opponent's turn 2, my turn 1, and the stack's like 3 spells deep because like there's a mental misstep and a daze and like
and the table is meant to be trying to win. So it is easier to assume the play patterns of people that are playing. It's not like regular Commander where it's like, I don't care, whatever. I'll just like Maze of It this person so that they like can't kill a person. Haha, fun, right? Like that doesn't happen. They're like, no, we're murdering each other.
So let me ask you this. So like what you're saying is basically that the resources that you are you're like employing to try to win or gain advantage are important enough in this format that you can't just frivolously, for the sake of politics, give one away. Because if you do, the power level of the other decks means you probably will lose. So like if I have some really powerful deck, like this Hope of Garapper Metalworker deck, it sounds super sweet. It sounds totally right up my alley and like really fun. And I go for it, but like one of my opponents Force of Wills me, my chain stops. Now I have to try to recover the next turn to like put my whole, thing back together. They're doing that because presumably I'm going to win on my turn and kill everyone, or they're doing that because they're like, that's the way it works. So like how many extra levels of interaction do you need if you want to just like not lose to the rest of the table?
I have played a total of 2 CDH games in my life, both with decks that
I've played 0. I don't know anything about it except what I've like heard secondhand, but I mean I can guess based on I when I was working at Heidi Ho, there was a group that used to come and play, and I would like kind of like come and look at their game when I wasn't too busy, but I didn't like
there's Doomsday decks, right? There's Storm decks, there's Artifact Shops decks, there's
somebody was playing a Kess Storm deck. They like resolved the Mind's Desire. It was pretty gross.
Like I've thought of building a Kess CDH deck as a third Kess deck, just so I have like that as well. Like there are.
You're gonna name that deck. All your Kess decks have names. What would you name the CDH Kess deck?
Is there a Kess and CDH? Kess to CDH mage? I don't know. There'll be something. It'll be sleeve based. Whatever the sleeves are. So I think like Ben, to go back to your question, there are stock lists, right? Like it is a format where people will talk to each other about like, oh, this is my Thrasio stock list. I added these 2 different cards, and those 2 different cards are a legitimate difference in deck style because the deck has 6 tutors, so being able to get something with Demonic Tutor, whatever. I would say that the Tamio deck that I played has actually is the deck of the decks I have that has gone in CDH toe-to-toe the most. And even then it was like the weakest at the table by like a margin.
Well, I guess what I like about any kind of competitive deck building format where it's like you have the ability to be somewhat creative is that I like the idea you can come up with like playing a single card that feels like it's your invention. I mentioned it earlier on the show, but Suffer the Past is a good example where like I love that card. But Suffer the Past is also like the perfect card for Cedh because the X, I gain life, they lose life, which means like at instant speed, as long as I'm doing it for, X is 3 or more, I'm going to presumably be like countering your effect by exiling 3 cards from your graveyard, gaining 3, you lose 3. And because you lost 3, I'm going to draw a card off the Cedh, which is like, that's so cool. It's so like dink and dunk, but janky, but it's also like Suffer the Past is better in a Cedh commander deck than most places it will ever be because like you're using it at instant speed at the exact right moment. And so I really like to be able to play creatively like that. Formats that are too powerful where you can't come up with some shenanigans uncommon like that are not my favorite. And so I think, CEDH sounds cool. It does sound like the power level is a little bit maybe harder for me to mess around with like medium level cards.
Ish, right? Like you do get some of a shell available to you. It's more like modern, right? Where like, yes, when you have lost bets, you had gone to GPs where I was like, here's a stock list, you did better, but you can still get away with weird stuff and brew, and it is a singleton format, right? So there's way more slots available to try stuff out, and there are groups that I am going to look up the name on Facebook for our listeners to join that are like CDH focused, and definitely the main resource. Go follow the Spike Feeders podcast. They and YouTube channel, they do like awesome Commander content all the time, and specifically about competitive. Like they're the one of the main podcasts about CEDH, right? That's what they focus on. Yeah, what I would recommend is beyond just Spike Feeders. Also, Braden Bowdish is one of the. I think he owns the group. If he's not, he's one of the admins of the MTG Competitive EDH group, and that is another good resource for like competitive EDH. And they're the ones that will like post lists every day on like what kind of builds they're doing, and they'll go over like with new commanders that come out, especially right now, because like one reason everything is in flux is because they keep printing such powerful stuff, especially legends, right? Like that, like literally Keenan is like throwing all of Commander in general is being thrown up in the air because Keenan exists, but EDH is one of those.
Brawl. I hate playing against Keenan.
Yeah, that card is dumb. It's the real emperor of.
that's the blue green 2/2 that has the 7 mana effect, right? Yeah,
all things that tap on like do it twice or something, right? I can't remember exactly.
It adds one more.
Yeah,
whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add one more, and then it also has a mana sink stapled onto it for some reason. You can pay 7 to look at the top X cards of your library. I don't remember how many, and put a non-human into play. Yeah, it's really annoying because, like, even if they just have a handful of like mana dorks and lands, that's enough, and they win. Hey,
right. And that's kind of like, but there is a pretty thriving, and there's a kind of a bad rep that CDH had it to begin with, and there's been a lot of work done, especially by community leaders in that scene, to kind of move away from that. Is like, because there's two different players, right? And we kind of describe them, right? There's the competitive EDH player who wants to play competitive EDH against other competitive EDH players where everyone's at the same level, or at least is saying they're up for that type of time. And then there's like pub stompers, which are people that like have 9 decks or 8 decks or 10 decks or 7 decks or whatever rated decks, but then go and play against 3 decks, right? Or like go to
like their local commander night and they just like start infinite comboing people with Gitrog monster or whatever.
And like and that's like one of the reasons Command Zones and Command Fest started doing this ranking system, is they are trying to avoid like just total mismatches in power level, right? Because that's like
it feels like a waste of your time. Like Commander takes longer than a 1v1 game because there's so many people acting. It just feels like a waste of everybody's 30 minutes or whatever if you just have to sit there and watch the Gitrog guy combo off on turn 4 when you're playing your like
dog
horse tribal deck or whatever.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is sort of my reverse of that feeling, because I think the thing you're talking about, that feels like sort of the competitive lack of common sense that I think some competitive people have, where it's like, this will be fun for me to just go like win a bunch, but like this is not the experience that other people are signing up for, is to just get crushed by my combo deck, because like X equaling Y and I win is not that hard to figure out. They could do it too. I just chose to do it. But all that being said, my thing that happens with a lot of Commander games, and I want to know kind of like how to, I don't know if get around this or just maybe this is just what happens, is like kind of last night, right? It's like you get to like turn 12, turn 14, turn 15, and the game feels like it's going forever. Feels like people are kind of like a standstill. There's like a power player, a bunch of players sort of passing, not doing much. But there's so many things on the battlefield that it's like my head sort of hurts. You heard me on the show last night. Like, Alex, how many, what are all the cards in your graveyard? And you're like, here's the 14 relevant cards. And then they're like, oh, you return this to my hand with Psych Rift. I have these cards in hand. That's like, there's so much information. I don't know what to do. Because already in 1v1, if you have like 13 creatures, my head starts to hurt. I already don't know what to do in 1v1. Like, so when there's so many variables, it starts to be like, I can't really interact with everything. I have to just ignore everything else and just try to win by myself. But that's not optimal Magic. Ignoring everything else and trying to win by myself is that's a good rule to get just like dunked on, basically.
Well, ish. I mean, like people argue modern is that at times, but So there's a few answers to that, right? A, digital magic is harder. This is a solution I don't have. The solution I have is COVID going away, right? Is like, you don't have my graveyard available to see in an easy way that you can just pick up and look at whenever you need to, or I had it laid out in a way that you could like look at it. You had to actually had me read it every time, which just sucks. Welcome to Commander. There's cards that like don't work because they are literal like a Villainous Wealth is a card that most people have had to take out of their decks because it just doesn't work in digital magic.
Warp
World
paper camera.
Not like Magic the Gathering Online.
Magic.
Like,
yeah, Magic Online Villainous Wealth works fine.
Yeah. Because if I cast Villainous Wealth targeting players in the world that I am in right now, I have no way of getting their cards into play under my control because they're in Tappy's case,
and mind controls and stuff get complicated like that. Even just control magic on Alex's creature, it's like on his camera, and he has to like turn it around or
and
something.
I recommend Infinite tokens. Hashtag not sponsored, which are their tokens that have dry erase. They're made out of dry erase material, so you can write whatever you want on them, and they're very useful for digital magic in general. A lot of shout outs this episode. Yeah, but to kind of answer your question, there's different answers to it, right? The one answer is what I have gotten to in my time, which is I'm playing control decks that avoid the attack step, right? Like I don't have to deal with your attacky creatures if I make it so attacking me is unprofitable with a Ghostly Prison. Or
I know classically you hate the attack step.
I hate the attack
step.
It's like
you and I kind of share it. I like it when I have like one creature and you can't block, but like otherwise I also hate it.
Yeah, I don't want to do creature combat. That's something I'm not into. So how do
I
avoid that? Yeah, exactly. I'm not here for that. Counting is overrated. Can go the way of trees. So that's one answer, right? Like is working to create board states where just attacking you is unprofitable and you're trying to win through.
That's another reason to play board wipes, is it saves space in your head. There's been plenty of times where a board is too big, and I don't necessarily think that people are going to attack me because like I have some creatures of my own that can block, and it would be a messy combat, or maybe like, you know, it's like a player that I know they're mad at somebody else for destroying their enchantment or whatever, and so I know who they're going to attack. But things are just getting too complicated. There's too many variables. Somebody could turn on me at any moment, or like if one player attacked me and then the next player attacked me, I'd be dead. And I don't want to think about all of this. Day of Judgment or whatever, you know. But those are play styles, right? Like if you really want to play Glacial Chasm or Ensnaring Bridge or Day of Judgment to try and invalidate large swaths of opponents' cards, that is one way to play. But if you don't want to play like that, you kind of said this earlier, you kind of need a shortcutting. And so you were shortcutting. You knew which of Alex's cards mattered, right? You knew that he was a big threat because of his board. You knew that Glacial Chasm and Maze of Ith were going to stop you from killing him with Inkmoth Nexus. So you knew, you like shortcutted in your head, I need to kill Alex, this is what I need to do to kill him. And I think those shortcuts are really important in Commander because it can save you a lot of cognitive space. Knowing every single card in somebody's graveyard is just like, even in paper, it's just not, like people just have like 25 card deep graveyards, you have 3 opponents, and you can play like Relic of Progenitus or something to invalidate that whole class of cards. But it's easier to just kind of shortcut, like know what's important, know like, okay, well, I don't know every card in that person's graveyard, but I know they have a Craterhoof Behemoth, so I need to watch out to see if they're going to reanimate it, or you know, you need to know what's important in the game. And I think part of that is knowing Commander. And even without a lot of experience, you knew which of Alex's cards were important, what was stopping you from killing him and what was going to kill you, and that's really all you need to know. For the most part.
Well, I think that's like that's like where the sort of similarity to the relevant 1v1 formats I understand and like comes in. It's like he was doing things. I mean, Alex, everything you did last night, they're all things that you do in your Highlander decks. Like that's the same stuff. I recognized every card, every tutor, every sequence. It's not like us playing that is that different from an EDH deck. It's more like if I plan on being able to like suffer the past your graveyard in response to some trigger, there's 2 other people that I have to deal with. So 1v1ing the thing to kill you means that probably I'm vamp tutoring for that so that I can't answer the Progenitus that might kill me otherwise, which is where that's where it gets so hard.
I think ironically and when you countered the Progenitus, I'd like to remind the class that you countered it more because you wanted 10 mana for mana drain than anything else.
Super sick. It just seemed cool, though.
How many opportunities do you get 10 mana off a mana drain?
Yeah, like that's worth it. Even if you didn't spend it, it was worth it, I think. I think that like And to the other side is I do think CDH has less of an issue with, right? There is a thing that happens in more casual circles of Magic that, like, I'm a rarer player in the sense that I like being a control player in Commander, and people generally sometimes don't love that, either being that player and that challenge or having to deal with that person because they like doing their things. And there's a lot of like turtling, right? And CDH doesn't have that as much, and larger power level formats don't have that as much. But the like mid tier, which I think is the space that you will have the least amount of fun, is in that kind of like, we're just here to have fun side of things, unless you were playing something like the one place that you might have fun is that's a place that like cool tempo decks or like Kesta's Crimes has a little bit more play, where it's like you get to be a little bit more jockeying around people for position. But I think you would really appreciate some of the more high power level stuff, especially because in those formats people are trying to win, right? Not even just CDH, but the Josh, Jimmy power level of Magic, which is like their power level Magic was created by me and Craig to start with, right? Like we taught them how to play Commander, and we were both playing at that power level, and so they kind of adopted starting there and then have gotten better from there, right? So I think that's where you would probably have more fun, where people are just trying to win. I can't promise that I'm always going to be a good time because I'm trying to not lose generally.
It does depend though, Alex, because Ben wants to get away with playing some jank too.
Sure. Yeah. That's
right,
true.
Right.
And I don't think
you have to balance like the desire to win, and you don't want to just like be dirtling around too much and like, oh well, I'll just not attack for one turn because I want to see what you have to do or whatever. Like if you want to avoid that, but you also want to get away with playing some jank, it's a little more difficult,
And some of it's just
sometimes you have to put up with it.
Some of it's playing games, right? Like jank is still totally fine. It's just figuring out like how to take advantage of that, right? I to be honest, what's the X graveyard card that you've now mentioned 4 times and have killed me with multiple
Suffer
times?
the Past.
Suffer the past.
That card's nuts.
It's done well versus you, Alex.
I know. That card is very, very good, and I think is totally playable in Commander. Like, in fact, very playable in Commander. And I would recommend you keep doing it against my personal enjoyment.
Well, I think what's funny about that card, just so people understand sort of where that comes from, because I think this is like a decent portal for a quick second. Until
for audio only, can you say what the card does?
Yeah, it's 1 black X instant. Exile X target cards from target opponent's graveyard, and that opponent loses X life. You gain X life. And so basically, like the whole premise of Highlander, our little 6 deck format we play, is like it's 1v1. It's highly competitive. You have very good cards, and so you are trying to figure out ways to kind of cut your, to cut the edges and make sure you have ways to not lose to burn. You want to make sure that graveyard decks don't wreck you. You want to make sure that aggro decks don't just destroy you. And so you need to have like X number of answers in every single deck, plus tutors and all those things. And so like you're constantly looking for things that sort of have utility against multiple strategies, which is where like I was like, Suffer the Past. Okay, like if I do this, even I just do it for like 3 against a burn deck, it invalidates 1 burn spell. It maybe gets rid of something out of their graveyard that probably doesn't matter. But like best case scenario, like it helps further my game plan of killing you and gains me some life. Against like a resurrection deck, it's just amazing, right? Like
and Commander is like reanimate. The chances that you play a Commander deck and someone doesn't utilize their graveyard is extremely low, right?
Whoa.
Like, yeah, and that's
right?
like it's you can have hate cards be a little bit better in Commander because there are going to be more different strategies you play with it every game.
Yeah, Tormod's Crypt is an all-star in my favorite Commander deck.
The scariest card you played literally all last night was Ashiok.
I remember that. Everybody freaked out when they saw the Ashiok.
I literally spent every resource I had countering it 4 times.
Well, the first time I let it resolve, I could have countered your counter, and I was like, no, I'll let him think that he's defeated me, but I still have the Suffer the Past that I'll save. I should have just... I mean, so for the record, when I tried to cast it, Glacial Chasm and Maze of Ith were both in play. So like it wasn't going to do the trick for me yet. Like that, if I resolved that I wasn't going to get what I wanted that turn. You would have had to like let some stuff happen and keep it in play for me to be able to like get what I wanted out of it.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think you not fighting for it too hard was necessarily the wrong decision with the information you had at the time. It just like from my perspective, like my deck is all tutors and graveyards and lands in play. Yeah. And that card negates all of that single-handedly. So Yeah, it just is like the graveyard edge is good, right? Like I think you were playing really powerful cards last night. I don't think that, and you almost killed multiple people multiple times. The only reason you didn't kill Carson a few times was because I was untapping your Mazavith because I wanted you to keep trying to fight each other so I could just win.
I didn't even kill Carson. You
frickin'
Maze with me. You savage.
You sweared.
You bad guy.
You sweared. Marshall's gonna.
Can we not swear on the show?
No.
I thought we could.
No.
We never really.
We've never been able to swear on the show.
So now he's gonna cover it with him going frickin'.
I had a stroke. Okay. For the edited feed, you freaking Maze-avithed me the turn I was gonna kill Carson.
Yeah, I did.
I had him dead to rights, and you mazed me. You're such a jerk. Well, I got my own maze just so I could counter your maze, but it didn't work.
Rashad import. You need Rashad import.
Yeah. So I do think it would be really cool. What we should do is we should reach out to Braden and Jim from Spike Feeders and see if we'd maybe put together like a cool CDH game where maybe they both provide each of us with decks that we like get to all fight each other with. That would be fun. Also, before we ended the episode, I do want to read, unless we have specific things we want to talk about, I do want to read some of the like advice and comments people gave towards the comment on like how do you play Tempo in Modern from Twitter. You ready?
In Commander. How do you play Tempo in Commander?
Yeah. Tempo in Commander. Commandered. That's a word that I said.
Kumanoder?
From Ben Timberwolf at Primal Green Thor. I love Tempo. Cards like Reigns of Power, Illusionary Gambit, and Portal Mage are all criminally underplayed. I also really enjoyed bounce to the top of library effects or one-sided bounces like Aetherize and River's Rebuke. Don't forget green with cards like Plow Under.
Damn, Plow Under. That's some rude magic in any format.
A lot of people really liked the new blue commander that was added in M21, which is Baron, Tolarian Archmage. The blue one, you bounce a creature.
The Mana War.
Yeah, the Mana War.
Yeah, he's the Mana War guy.
That draws you cards. So at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw cards. So he lets you kind of do shenanigans with that. That was brought up a lot. Grant Dandanu. At Grant Dandanu. Olivia Voldaren is sweet. Black and red can slow people down, whether land destruction, creature destruction, or artifact destruction. Mana doubles like Nirkana Revenant, Crypt Ghast, and Cabal Coffers also let you kind of go off. It's a very fun deck. And then just like a ton of Edric. Everyone's high on Edric for Tempo. So I've had some really good success with generals who help regain card advantage on their own. Namely, look at Keranos, and then a partner pair that includes Krom, which is the red-blue partner commander. I've liked pairing him with Bruce Tarl because then it hits really hard. He gives double strike to things. And if you need more elaboration, he offered to help. Rishimi. And then we got to some people commenting that it's hard. Adeliz, the Cinderwind, which is the wizard, I think, right?
Haste.
That's sweet. I actually really like the idea of an Adeliz commander.
Yeah, Adeliz, the Cinderwind, which is legendary creature, human wizard, flying haste. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, wizards you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. That does like a lot. Nice. And that does a lot with spells you like, right? Like now you're taking advantage. Ponder.
Now when you play Ponder, you're like overrunning.
And then.
That means my Sage of Epiteer can be just a straight up beast.
Oh yes, what a massive Sage of Epiteer. Yes.
What makes wizard tokens? What makes like bird wizard tokens or like fairy wizard tokens?
Does Kaikar make wizard
This
tokens?
sounds like an excellent Scryfall search.
Yes,
that we can do off the episode and start brewing.
Someone also brought up Kaikar, right? The blue, white, red general that makes bird tokens whenever you cast spells. Yeah. I did. Douglas DJ Johnson at Rose of Thorns did send a Sig River Cutthroat deck. Plays very much like a Delver deck, trying to get an early damage, stay ahead with card draw and counter spells, and keep them off pace with removal spells, which sounds exactly what you want to be doing. I could tag you in that.
Please do.
And then Carson brought up asking for a friend that totally isn't named Ben Bateman. I don't know what he was talking about. Edric, Rashmi, Teferi, Mage of Zalafir, so the Teferi, creature Teferi, the original one. Brago, King Eternal, was also brought up as something that people are really, really like. Who's the bounce when it attacks, he bounces creatures against value.
Yeah, the flyer, the blue-white one. That card's so good.
A few people brought up Yorion, which is the companion that you can't play as a companion because it doesn't work, but you can play as the commander. So you like,
but like very similar to Brago in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they would be similar. I would probably play with Brago over Yorion, but there's maybe reasons to do the other way. I mean, personally,
they're often political reasons, since a lot of times people are doing like nasty shenanigans with Brago.
I also really like the new Nyambi esteemed speaker, the new blue-white flash.
Blue-white 3-drop, yeah.
Teferi's daughter.
Teferi's daughter. 2-drop. Yeah, 2 1-for-2 flash when Nyambi esteemed speaker enters the battlefield. You may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost, and you can discard a legendary card to draw 2 cards for 3 mana. That card is sweet. I have thought of building a new blue-white deck to accompany Geist just to try Nyambi out.
I wish that I guess you just put Baron in the deck with her, but her and Baron play so well together. It's kind of a bummer that you can't have Baron as your commander with her as a card. Instead, you gotta.
Yeah, Baron goes into her. Yeah. It still works. It still happens. You still got it.
Well, so for everybody who's listening, who's excited about trying out Commander, I'm gonna keep trying it out. Cass and I, Michael, I hope, will be doing our next stream 8:30 next Monday, which is the 20th, July 20th, Monday, July 20th, 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be playing some more Commander. I will probably be playing a different deck than Cedh, but if I can't in COVID figure out a way to get a deck full of not proxies, maybe I'll just update Cedh and get rid of a lot of the crap and just try to make it better. One way or another.
We can worst case scenario, I can drop some decks off if you want to try Kess Crimes out, which I would love to see you try, or I could even lend you both Kess decks, just drop them at the office and then you could pick them up in the dark of night when no one's there. Do a pass off.
We can do the logistics
off the podcast.
Michael, what deck will you be playing on the next stream? Because I would like.
If you guys put me on a stream, I'm going to play my favorite commander deck of all time, Kumano Master Yamabushi.
Oh,
a classic Kamigawa legend. He is an ice shaman.
That seems like it's necessary, Cass. I feel like there's no an if there.
Yeah.
I need Michael there on the next one.
Yeah, I'm down. Yeah, Michael's in. Unless as long as Michael's schedule permits. I'm more worried about dog crimes.
Yes, I am busy and have a puppy and obligations.
Now, I will say most of the successful Commander streams that I watch generally have dog cameras and cameras focused on puppies that they have. So,
I don't have technology for a dog cam, I don't think.
That's fair, but if you were to just hold Peanut up to the camera during stream, I believe people would be hyped.
Somebody cast Day of Judgment. Peanut, eat all my permanents.
Dog crimes. And so that's I think that's a good shout out. So make sure to follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Kess Wiley everywhere.
You guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media, all places. Go check out youtube.com/nerds and suits. That's a big thing I'm doing recently. Live music, all kinds of cool stuff there. It's interviews. It's a dream of mine. I'm very appreciative of all of you guys that have shown up.
And a big thank you to the members of House Modern. Those are our patrons on patreon.com/theMMcast. Please check out. There's a bunch of cool stuff. We do meetups and there's deck techy things and there's just kind of you get the raw feed. So every week when we record the episode, there's stuff. Literally, Ben swore this episode. Not allowed on the regular feed, but if you go to Patreon right now, you can listen to him say a bad word.
Or it is.
Make sure to follow on Twitch, twitch.tv/Kess Wiley. That is where on the Twitch side, so when we stream Commander, it goes to Twitch and YouTube. So you can go either way, but Twitch also, if you go to Kess Wiley, you'll get to the Commander stream. And make sure if you're watching on YouTube, once again, subscribe, hit the bell, all of those things. It honestly really helps. And if you hit the bell, you get alerted to when we do live streams. We're not consistent enough at this to be able to guarantee you'll know when it's going to happen. So you liking that bell makes it so you get an alert when we start going live.
Also, if you follow Alex and/or Ben on Twitter, they'll typically announce before one of them is going live.
Yep. And then also please comment. We want to hear what you think a great tempo Commander is, or if you don't like Commander, why? What is your issue with it? And is there things that you would rather be different about Commander that would make it more fun? Thanks everybody for watching and listening and hanging out. We'll talk to you guys next week on the stream.
Thanks for watching, guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.